Greetings, friends. Your cartoonist pal Stan here again with a brand new episode of 50 Years in the Dungeon. The show I'm doing to celebrate the fact that this hobby we love, tabletop role playing games, has been around for 50 plus years. And I've been celebrating that for the past year by interviewing folks who've worked in the industry on the games we love. While I talk to them, I do a cartoon homage to a classic piece of gaming art. And for that, the first year, of course, the real focus was Dungeons and Dragons, which was the first tabletop role playing game, still the biggest one, and all of the art I did was from that game. In fact, if you haven't been with me for the past year, I did a piece to represent each year of the 50 years that we were covering. However, we're now in season 2 of the show. I completed that part of the project. I did 50 interviews with 50 pieces of art. They're not all done yet. I'm working on them. But I've got 45 of them done. And now I'm coming forward. I'm enjoying this, and I'm broadening the scope. Starting to bring in people who didn't necessarily work at Wizards of the Coast or TSR, or even on Dungeons and Dragons. And I'm going to start doing homages to game art from other products too. So we'll see. This is going to start to open up. Some other crazy things are going to happen. I'm looking at some interesting shows. Should be fun. But today we're going to do something that feels pretty comfortable, pretty similar to what we've done previously. I've got a very interesting guest who has worked on Dungeons and Dragons. Also, a lot of other games, including some great ones he's published in the last 10 years on his own. We'll talk about all of that. Hello, Burkwald. Hello, Michael J. Pastor. Thank you guys for showing up. Good to see you. As I was saying, my guest tonight is the ever irascible and man, this guy writes like nobody's business. I've worked at a lot of times where I've worked as a producer and as an editor, and he has always been on my list of people when I'm asked who do I want to get on a project. This guy's name comes up very shortly. It is none other than Robert J. Schwalb, who is in charge of Schwalb Entertainment. We're going to talk about all of that and more if I can remember what button I push. See, it's been too long since I've done this whole gig thing. Here we go. Robert J. Schwalb. Rob, thank you. Thank you very much for joining me on the show.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm very glad to be here.
You are a person that is often talked about, and we used to see each other at conventions a lot. Now, neither one of us do that very much anymore. But both of us also have kind of stepped back from the limelight. This show, I'm trying to step back in.
Yeah.
But I know you've let yourself not be as much out there in the public eye as you used to. So I appreciate you coming out of your dark closet behind you to have a chat.
Well, it's if anyone was going to get me out of my hobbit hole, it was you. So glad you got me, and yeah, I'm happy to come out and see the sunlight or the darkness instead of my normal four walls.
You carry your own darkness around you, like Scrooge.
I do. Yeah. It's I picked it up for cheap before Kmart was closing. I just grabbed a couple, and they fit so well. I can't take it off.
Let's see. Birkenwald says he got a few Shadow of the Demon Lord books published in Polish.
Yes. My Polish partners are fantastic folks. They do a really great job. They've got a good vision of the game and deeply committed to making all sorts of awesome stuff for Demon Lord. Very excited to work with them.
I look forward to talking a bit about that and the other stuff you've been doing with Schwalb Entertainment. You know, I even have I can switch over what it says there so we can say if those people who want to know can go to schwalbentertainment.com. But as I do this show, let's say I like it to just kind of be um, about this thing that we love so much, right? The reason you and I have made our hobbies our living is that we love role playing games. At least I assume you do love role playing games, right?
You know, sure. I mean, not as much as Star Trek, but I can't.
Oh
I
yeah,
can't.
no. If I
I
could make
love role
watching Star Trek forget gaming, I'd be on the couch right now.
No, I do. I have been a lover of role playing games for, oh gosh, almost 40 years.
A long time. Yeah,
Yeah, I don't
I'm
even want to think. Don't even want
I'm
to think
very
about that.
fond about from the very first couple of episodes. I started asking as my guests would tell me when they came in. I'd add together the number of years we'd both been gaming, and it always gets close to 100. It's like, well, it's the 50th
Yeah,
anniversary, but we've been gaming for 94 years.
alarming. Yeah, and I was, I was, I didn't get into D. I mean, I didn't. I was not there for the very beginning,
Mm,
since I am exactly as old as D&D is. I mean, we share the same birth year, um, but it was mid '80s when I jumped in, and that
yeah.
was or when I started. I mean, but I'd known about it since I was knee high to a grasshopper, as they say here in these parts.
So how that's that's interesting to me. In that just most of the people I've been talking to are about 5 years earlier than that when they got into it. So if that bleh, you're the first person I've particularly had a conversation with who could say that D&D was or role playing was a thing that you knew about. It wasn't something that suddenly mystically appeared on the scene, right?
Right.
What?
I mean, it was like I was living in Grand Rapids, and my best friend, who the late great Micah Washington, rest in peace, my friend. He and I used to just run around and get and do all sorts of fun stuff. We wanted to go see the movie Dungeon Master.
Yeah.
I think it was released in our neighborhood as Digital Knights. Um, it had a bunch of different titles, but we uh, we talked a lot about wanting to play D&D, and he swore up and down that he knew somebody who could teach us. Then my dad moved us from Grand Rapids to Nashville, which was a culture shock and all that good stuff that comes with relocating. Uh, and I still, I mean, I watched the cartoon, and I would see D&D comics in the comic books, and and I knew a little about it, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
fantasy was my number one love from the start, for as long as I can remember. I mean, uh, probably going back to Grimm's fairy tales and Anderson's fairy tales,
Mm-hmm.
and so on. And my dad reading the Conan books, the old Ace paperbacks, and sneaking off and trying to read those at my young 6 year old self. But yeah, it wasn't until my neighbor, who knew that I was kind of interested in D&D, decided that his mom, I guess, picked up this copy of Rahaja at a yard sale
Mm-hmm.
and he's like, you can have it for a quarter. And so I bought it for a quarter, but it didn't have any of the rules. It just had the module.
Right.
And for those people that don't know this module, this is a curious starting point because, well, first of all, it's from Tracy and Laura Hickman, and I think it's as good as Ravenloft
Mm.
in many respects. It is but what makes it so distinct is that you're not there to kill a bunch of monsters. And in fact, you don't want to kill the monsters because everyone that's in this dungeon, spoiler alert, is under under the influence of this evil spell. Now, of course, being whatever age I was, I didn't care about that, and I'm trying to back solve D&D, or try to rebuild D&D based on what I could kind of parse from
Right.
this 32-page saddle stitch stapled book, and it became the foundation of my first role playing game, which would be called Passages. And so I ran that for my sixth grade class, and in the playground, and it was a really ridiculous role playing game. It had no idea what I was doing, and you would gain levels every time you crossed from one side of the map to the other. And so people figured out where the crossing point was, and they would jump back and forth on map side. I was like, "Oh, this game's busted!" I realized at the time. But then, so my friend Landon at that he took pity on me, and he and some other fellas on the playground would talk about Oriental Adventures and AD&D and other and stuff about that. And he was like, "Yeah, we'll teach you how to play." So we went over. I went over to spend the night at his house. And I'm ready to talk comic books, make my first D&D character, and maybe play the game. Thinking that, of course, I thought we would just play the game. I didn't think there was a whole character creation process involved. And so, of course, imagine my dismay when I'm stuck at a kitchen table having to do math and rolling dice and having to make decisions. And they're like, "I don't care about any of this at all. Let's go talk about the Defenders because that's the best comic book that's being made right now because it's got the son of Satan." Uh, but 2 weeks later, I get invited back, and his mom made the best chili dogs and lasagna, and would load us up with candy and all sorts of other stuff. And so I played Booger, my first basic D&D red box fighter, and I love the game so much. After just like 10 minutes of playing, I was like, he's no longer named Booger. He is now Ator, named after the wretched movie Ator the Fighting Eagle, which, yeah. And so and I had two characters, Pardue, named after Monsters and Mazes wizard, magic user, played by Tom Hanks. I speared him, so I could only play one character, just Ator. And that started my long obsession with all things D&D related.
So you did you play board games too? And
Yeah, my dad was really big into board. Not really, really big, but he was always big on games.
yeah,
So we would we either were playing chess or checkers or Stratego or whatever. But
mm-hmm.
then we would play. We played some Avalon Hill games. Do you remember the game Wizard's Quest?
Mm-hmm.
I love that game. It's a bananas game. But I just love it to pieces. So I played that with him a few times, and then we played Conquest of the Empire when that came out, and Fortress America. And so we did a lot of that. But my dad kind of knew that I was really interested in D&D, and this is back before I learned how to play D&D.
Mm-hmm.
But after I had made passages, so in that narrow window, he had gone to some convention. I guess it was maybe the American Booksellers Association convention, ABA,
Mm-hmm.
and he worked for Thomas Nelson Bible Publishers. So this apple has fallen rather far from the tree. But he went, and TSR was there, and according to him, now he might have just dumpster dived all these books, but he came back with stacks of books. And he claimed he talked to people over at TSR, and they were all excited about whatever. And so he was like, "My son's making his own role playing game. Well, here's some stuff." And so I had all sorts of stuff. No rule books. I had adventures and screens and character sheet pads and all that stuff. But it was neat. So it filled out kind of my collection, and that helped get me really into it. And I remember my first time. I guess I got the red box from a bookstore, and that's what really kind of got me going.
So did you play? So I mean, you mentioned that that you're living in Tennessee, which is not well, not what it's not. It is a very religious part of the Bible Belt. Somewhere
Yes,
on the Bible Belt.
like the buckle.
Well, I'd, your father worked for a company that there was a Bible selling company. Did you just say?
Yeah, before he worked for Thomas Nelson, he worked for Zondervan in Grand Rapids, and so then he took a job at Thomas Nelson, and both companies produce Bibles, and they also produce religious fiction and other stuff.
Steve Winter
Which is
says TSR reps probably just didn't want to pack all that stuff up and were happy to give it away. Oh, and Sue Wineline is also here saying hi.
Hey, Sue. Hey, Steve.
um, so I mean, it's fascinating to me that you don't your story doesn't include any of the uh, D&D is evil, which was very rampant in
Oh,
that era.
oh no, 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 no. It totally did. See, it was my mom was just a little late getting to
Yeah,
that point. Uh, she got to she was I was in for maybe 6 months to a year before I started hearing about how evil D&D was, and she became very concerned about how much I talked about D&D and how much I talked about my characters and the adventures we would go on,
yeah.
and going through the deities and demigods, killing all the gods with our super powerful characters. She just got to the point where she was, you know, you can't play D&D anymore. You can play any other role playing game you want, but
Okay,
D&D is off the table. So I tried to explain that to my friend, and we started playing everything else. And he was, as much as I wanted to, and I was just getting into Greyhawk because we had left another setting and we were going to the Grey, and I really wanted to get into that, but it was the ship had sailed. My mom had put her foot down. No more D&D, and to the point where she made me sell my D&D books. So everything
oh,
I had to get rid of it, and I had everything. Um, and it took me until I was married before I got it all back. Uh, so there was a long time there. But on the other hand, while this was a big disaster for me personally,
mm,
it also was an opportunity because I played things I never would have probably ever
right,
touched. Because D&D was forbidden, but Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay was not. Which, if that makes any sense, D&D was forbidden, but I could play the Palladium role playing game, which has all these bizarre occult stuff,
right.
content inside. And so we played Heroes Unlimited, and we played Shadowrun when that came out, Cyberpunk and Traveler, and even some fairly obscure things like there was an Arthurian game called Chivalry,
Yeah,
where it was like it was a binder, and you had this loose leaf stuff, and it came with a Luzaki dice were in a bag inside. We played that a couple of times. So I got to fill my head with and Twilight 2000. I can't forget that. But I filled my head with all these other role playing games.
right.
Um, but and really because and this ties into my comic book love at the time, was that Marvel superheroes just became the game that we would play to the almost to the exclusion of everything else for a long time.
Right.
That was the
Sue Wineline says, "My parents actually bought me D&D when I was a kid. What they drew the line on was listening to Barry Manilow music, which was not okay because he sang a song about a bar." Jefferson Dunn says, "Warhammer Fantasy is way grimmer."
yeah,
It
yeah.
is. um, so interestingly, yeah, I mean, I started playing D&D, but the game that I didn't find anyone else that really wanted to play in high school. And when I got to college, the game that we played was Villains and Vigilantes. Also,
Oh yeah.
huge. I mean, comics, huge thing for me. And V&V hit just in that era, and we started playing, and that was it for like 8 years.
Did you turn yourself into a character, a
Oh,
superhero?
you had to. You that
You had
well
to. Yeah.
had to. That's how we threw those out pretty quickly, and then made fictional
Yeah.
characters. But yeah,
Yeah. I can't tell you how many arguments we had over what your physical strength,
yeah.
what
What's
score
your
was.
dex? Your dex is no way.
Yeah. Yeah.
uh,
Those, good.
Jeff Dunlap says champions, champions. Yes, there were a
Yeah.
lot. There were a lot
Yeah.
of really good uh, superhero games in the '80s.
Champions was my first convention role playing game. I
Yeah.
played at Dragon Con in 1986, I think.
All right. Before we go on, I'm going to switch the view and come up here. And as we continue, I'm going to draw a cartoon homage to Shadow of the Demon Lord, your game.
Oh, look at that. He's so cuddly.
Isn't he adorable? He's so cuddly. Um. So yeah. I'll work on that as we chat. So what? When you played Marvel, were you playing Marvel characters, or did you make new characters of your own?
We started by playing Marvel characters, but then we quickly moved on to make our own. And we had our own comic book universe. One of my hobbies, my parents were divorcing, and I kind of got lost in the shuffle, was just to make characters for every role playing game I had. I would make
Right.
character after character. So I had binders loaded with superheroes that I would roll up, or I would build based on what I imagined them able to do. I remember Ultimate Powers coming out and that just being the greatest thing ever. Um, but yeah, so that was a big thing. We'd cross universes. So characters from one universe would go to
Mm-hmm.
the other, and so we had these DC Marvel kind of team ups and stuff, and it was a lot of fun.
What?
Also during the time, what's that?
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was also during that time I got to play Rollmaster, and that's I started with MERP, and then I eventually graduated to Rollmaster later on, and that became an obsession for about 20 minutes. I really loved that. I really loved that game, and I still do. And it's one of the role playing games that I would love to go and work on now.
Yeah.
There aren't many role playing games that are out there that from the classic era that I have not yet had a chance. Call of Cthulhu being one of them, and Rollmaster being another one that I didn't get a chance to really fiddle
Have,
around with in a professional capacity. But it's something I've always wanted to do.
have you never done anything for Call of Cthulhu?
Nope. I talked. I guess when Jim Louder was still with them, we had talked a little bit about doing some fiction, and then there was, but I never really chased it down. It was interesting, but and it would be exciting to do, I think. But
Yeah. I
I'm
mean,
pretty much
I'm also big. I love Call of Cthulhu, and for a while at when I was doing Super Genius games, we got um, we got an official license from Charlie Crank. We were producing Call of Cthulhu official material for
oh
a
cool.
couple of years, and then they said please stop.
This is always the way it is.
Um,
We during early pandemic, Call of Cthulhu was in regular rotation in our weekly games. Um, yeah, with that and Delta Green, we played a lot of both of those.
so how long were you playing Marvel? So is that through high school and into college, or
No, at some point, I guess it was after my freshman year in high school. My mom decided that she wanted out of Nashville and shipped us off to this fine little town of Murfreesboro, which is where I have lived ever since. Which is even scarier. I've lived here so long that even if I hadn't purchased anything from Davis Market and went, I still could never leave. I'll explain that. Murfreesboro's got this curse. There used to be this corner grocery store beer place thing called Davis Market right next to campus. And the story was that if you went in and then you left, you would die, which is exactly what happened to Jimi Hendrix. He went in when he was in Murfreesboro for whatever reason and left, and he passed away. The only way to break the curse is if you urinate on the obelisk, and the obelisk marks the geographical center of Tennessee. And so you can imagine that a bunch of rowdy pre-internet teenagers urinating on the obelisk in just the desperate hope of getting out of this little town. So yeah, so anyway, so once I moved from Nashville, my connections for Marvel superhero came to an end, and by that point, I was rebelling, and so I was playing D&D again.
screw you? I'm playing D&D.
Yeah, and I mean, and no shade thrown at second edition. I went back straight to first, and I did played first edition all the way through high school and a few years afterwards. And so I guess I jumped into second edition pretty late in that edition.
Mm. Um, and
Lovely demon.
what?
A lovely demon you're doing
Oh,
there. It's
thank you,
really
thank you. Well,
very
it's
charming.
the thing that makes this game work, this show work, is that I don't have to think when I'm drawing what someone else already did. It's like if I was trying to make that up, I could not have a conversation with you and draw. All right, uh, so you were playing D&D in college, or
So we played second edition D&D through my first aborted attempt at college, and um, then throughout the intervening years when I was a McDonald's manager, and then through and then pretty much on full time until I got into the business, and
uh,
that can.
all right. So how did that happen? How did you make that leap?
Well, it was after I graduated my second go at college. I was considering grad school, but realized that moving at that point in my life, we just purchased our house, and there was really no way for me to kind of pick up and take classes in Memphis or Nashville or really anywhere else. So I was really so I decided I could either chase down a lucrative job with my philosophy English degree or sell carpet, and so I had chosen to sell carpeting. And so I was working at a carpet store as a salesperson and also working at a liquor store as a clerk. So I'm doing that, and then I'm still kind of fiddling around with early third edition stuff. And the D20 system thing, the OGL, exploded, and it seemed like there were more companies than there were writers for those companies.
Yeah.
And so there were lots of open calls, and I figured, well, I can write a paper. I can certainly, and I've been playing role playing games you know, for a very long time. I should be able to do this. And so I jumped in, and I pitched a couple of books to Mongoose Publishing, and that was an interesting experience. I continued to pitch books. Then once I stopped working with Mongoose, I had started working with Green Renine. I did a couple of books for them, and then as I was stomping around looking for work, I had picked up a job with AEG for the world's largest dungeon, Paradigm Concepts, Goodman Games, Fantasy Flight. I did the Grim role playing game for the D20 version of that, and then eventually I landed a job with Green Renine with Chris, Nicole, and Hal, and Steve, and everybody else. And I became the D20 line developer, and that was it was incredible, right? This is an opportunity for me. I'm actually getting paid to do the things I was doing for free for years. Looking at games, looking at game mechanics, kind of, and picking them up, looking at them from different angles, and kind of rebuilding and polishing product to make sure they were ready to go to print. And it was exciting. It came with a heavy dose of imposter syndrome, of course. I think that everybody kind of goes through that. But the D20 side of my job didn't last very long because I think what happened was that no, not I don't think. What happened was I had the Ronins had made a deal with Games Workshop through the Black Library imprint to
Mm-hmm.
bring Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay back as second edition. And Chris designed that role playing game, and I became a writer and developer, and then eventually I took it over while Chris was working on other things for the company. So I was at that point I was managing the D20 property, the D20 lines, and also all of Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, while still doing freelancing on top of that.
That's a lot.
And it was a lot, and it's it was a whole lot, and probably more than I should have. And I'm surprised I'm still married because I was working 70-hour weeks easily. Um, but in the somewhere in there, I met Chris Perkins through Rodney Thompson. Hi, Rodney. Hi, Chris. Uh, and Chris, I expressed my interest in doing stuff for Wizard of the Coast, and Chris seemed amenable, and got an email to work on Tome of Magic for a third edition a week or two after Gen Con. And that kind of started this love relationship with Wizards of the Coast as a freelancer, and then as a out-of-house contractor for several years, and then to where I
All
am
right,
now.
let's go back. What were some of the first things you did at Mongoose? What were the your early products?
Oh boy, I really don't. Ugh. Yeah, okay. So
Okay,
I
we
didn't
can
know
do
what
this
I.
quickly. I don't. We don't have to stay on
Yeah,
this
all right,
one. I just.
all right. So they were doing these quintessential books that
Oh
were
yeah.
class type books, and I pitched one that was a new class, which they hadn't done before because they were focused on doing quintessential versions of the player's handbook classes. So I started with the witch,
Right.
and then I pitched them the barbarian book, and then we were moved. They were moving into doing races, and so I had pitched the half elf, I think, at one point. And really, at that point, things were right around then. Things were kind of falling apart, and I was looking elsewhere for work. Uh, and it was fine. I mean, it was a good experience. I learned a lot. I also probably spent more money making that book on my side than I actually did
Mm.
paycheck, just because I would, I was for the witch book. I read everything I could on witchcraft, and I'm not a person who would go to the library like a sane person. I would buy all these books and then just use them and then mark them up, you know. So I learned everything about herbs and properties of rocks and trees and all that fun stuff, and try to make it and give it a good fantasy spin. So it was a really good experience, but it also was impractical, right? I mean, I wrote it and then I waited a year and a half almost to get my first $1,000 for work that I spent probably uh, hundreds of hours making. So it was not a good investment, but that didn't deter me. I was able to pick up the
It worked
speed,
out
and
in it worked out in the long run.
it did sort of. Yeah, sure.
um, and so what were some of the things you did at Green Ronin? Because I know you that's where you came to my attention was while you were doing
Yeah,
stuff at Ronin.
yeah. That was because you were running the game mechanics with JD and Mark and
Right,
Rich, right?
right. Yes,
Yeah,
that was after. I mean, I I think I'd seen some of your stuff before I got laid off from Wizards, but yeah, we were in that D20 um, milieu after the layoff. That's what
right.
happened to me. Was we formed a game company like everyone else.
Like everyone else. But you guys went the modern route, which was cool because it was a really underserved area. So it was neat to have uh, accessories from the folks who worked on the game. So it was yeah. I have it all still. They're still on my shelf. Still pull them down every once in a while and pine for Stan when I look out the window looking for a star and do my Feifel impression
I pull up my
somewhere
shelf
out there.
sometime and I say, "Oh look, remember when I worked on games that people bought?" Yeah.
Yeah, it was. I guess why I started with the Unholy Warriors Handbook, and I worked in the Book of Fiends, then Black Company. Um, Later, we worked on Thieves World and the advanced books. We had some crazy plans for more demon stuff. The Lords of the Fiends was a big book that I started working on that was going to have something like 500 fiend lords in it. So it would have all the mythological archdevils and major demon figures, and it was bananas. Uh, and because each one of these entries, because I would overwrite everything, so each one of these entries was like 5,000 words, and so you think about like you have 5,000 it was an absurd number of absurd amount of content that we never actually got around to doing. But it was interesting on that in that era because D&D. I was such a flag waver for D&D at that point. It was a game that I loved, that I'd always loved, and I knew D20 Dungeon Dragons inside and out. I probably, yeah, I probably know it as well as I know my own games. And so it was so even though the sales, because as one can expect, the market quickly glutted with D20 content, and when that happened, sales died off and people were getting out.
So, I mean, one
And
of
so,
the interesting things about that era that doesn't get talked about a lot is that um, it, as you were saying, it was just a big explosion. Suddenly, everyone was producing stuff, and there was no, we don't want gatekeepers in our industry,
Right.
but there was no way to know what was going to be good, and it was an era where some of the good stuff survived on its merits, but a lot of the good stuff got drowned out and never made it. Like that didn't that maybe should have because it was so good, or
Right.
you produce products like some of those ones that you're talking about, that just full of amazing good stuff that just because of the era never got the look that they deserve.
By the end, because for those people who don't remember, there used to be these little D20 system logos that you put in your books to indicate compatibility with D&D, and you'd also put you have to have the player's handbook on the cover somewhere, and it was you just people stopped putting the D20 system logo on the books because it was a poison pill, right? People would look at it and pass over it. But I mean, in the market's defense, I guess there was D20 everything, right? From everything from Star Wars to Call of Cthulhu to things that probably shouldn't have ever been conceived as being a D20 product. But it was an interesting time, and it burned itself out. I'd say mid 2000s, and by the end, there were all the billions of different products that were out there just kind of all dried up and went away. It was a neat time.
Yes, it was interesting times, as they say.
Mm-hmm.
um, so you were doing stuff with Green Ronin, and then you started doing some stuff with Wizards as a freelancer. Um, I know that was a time that had, because I got to work with you some, at least near you some, during that era, and there were some great things and some awful things that happened. Um, I think in the end, it kind of the awfulness outshined the good stuff. But from there, you
Yeah.
decided to go on to do your own stuff. Now, I don't want to push you to talk about that if you don't want.
No, I mean, I think the thing about working as a contractor was that I didn't have that kind of blade hanging over my neck, like worrying about my job, because I was relatively cheap. I was producing 40,000 words a month, and I was getting a flat rate, and I was able to. And so when I became a full time contractor, that's all I did, and it was before the full time contractor gig started, because that was really I just became a workhorse for fourth edition. Before that, I probably worked on almost every latter day third edition book, with a very few exceptions, which was exciting, and I learned a ton. But fourth edition really shook me up, right? Because I had a, it was one of those games where I was a first, like a lot of people, very skeptical about the game, and I kind of recoiled in fear and loathing about it. But then I quickly came to love that game system. Uh, like I had was like intensely in love with it for a very narrow window. I think it was until the first Splat book came out and broke the game. And then after that, I still championed the game and still enjoyed running it and still could run it without, run it off. I didn't have to have any books open. I could just run it from almost pure memory. And I loved its pieces. And then it was, then fifth edition started. And I had been a particularly low point in my life, non-work life. And I had thought about moving out to Seattle. And so I don't know if that had anything to do with why I was offered a position on the fifth edition team or something else, but I ended up getting a position as a designer on fifth edition. And that was at a time when I think Rich Baker was leading the game. I know Rich Baker was leading the game still. And the team was pretty big, and it was exciting because we were able to it was a first opportunity for me to look at D&D from a perspective other than being someone who's stepping into other people's shoes and
Right.
carrying the game forward. But instead, I was helping shape D&D's identity moving forward. And so it was a really interesting time, and also coming to realize that you kind of expect everyone to believe the same things you believe about this game. I guess it'd be like if you're, Stephen Rodney McFarlane one, used to say that D&D is a religion of the book, and that you kind of expect that we're all reading the same books and we all have the same ideas about the contents of those books. But then there'd be situations that would come up where, some people would say, we need to have skills for all five senses, or, the quintessential D&D ranger is not Aragorn, it's Drizzt. And now I'm on the side of Aragorn, but I'm also looking at D&D from a bigger context. I know that Drizzt, in the eyes of the fan base, is certainly the ideal
Right.
ranger. But just having to kind of those clashes were just invigorating, because it helped shake off a lot of my preconceptions about the game and its place and its purpose and its function within the community, and trying to make sure everybody's happy and be true to every previous iteration of that game. At one point, we had I thought we had rallied around this idea that we were going to try to make a game that you could emulate any version of D&D. So
Right.
if you wanted to have like an OD&D experience, you could play the game by just dropping this chunk of rules. If you want to play a fourth edition style, you could adopt these particular rules. And it was this really big, ambitious plan that I think just got set aside out of necessity. But as the game went through, different leads, and then towards the end, it became clear that my work on that line had pretty much wrapped up as the game was coming closer to publication. And so then, when my contract was up, it wasn't renewed, and I went home and freaked the hell out, because what are you to do, right?
Yes. Actually, uh, the thing that you talked about, I'm that I don't think I've had anyone on who has felt as passionately about fourth edition as you have. And or as loved it. I've reached out to Rob Hainso recently to see if I can get him on, because I'd love to talk to him about that. I personally have a very complicated relationship with fourth edition. It's
Sure.
it's not it's not what I want when I come to D&D, but I love it as a game. Like, I think it's a great game. I
Yeah,
uh, I
that was my
didn't
thing
like
too.
with
Is that,
D&D.
well,
That was
we've
Does it matter? Does that matter? Right? It's still, I don't know.
I mean, I think with the benefit of being over 10 years past that game, I think we can look back and say fourth edition was as much D&D as D&D logoed sneakers are, or D&D
Right.
cartoons, or the Book of Vile Darkness movie, or whatever. Uh, the idea that D&D is fits neatly into any particular box is unfortunate. That we still kind of, it could be D&D to it could be D&D to you, uh, and it may not, fourth edition may not fit as tightly or snugly into our expectations. Like I would, I would expect D&D to have +1 swords and fireball and dispel magic and magic missiles that automatically hit and do damage, um, and not have powers for everybody and all the other stuff. But man, it played so well, right? That was the thing about that game, was that it's like it solved all the arguments. It was that would crop up and would derail second edition games. It was it had its problems, right? It was not a fast game.
What arguments are you do you mean?
Oh well, like rules interpretations, right? I mean, I can't tell you how many times in the second edition days, and even in third edition days, where there'd be some issue of the rule that would have to be debated, either derailing the game, or if you had common sense and you pushed it back to the end, then you would debate it then, right? And especially as those games get longer in the tooth, there's more content for it and more rules interactions. The games became a little bit more complex to handle. Um, Fourth made sure that every character had parity in the sense that every player was contributing equally to the gameplay experience. Everybody had something to do on their turn. There was never any of that kind of, I don't get to do anything because I'm stuck firing my crossbow that I can't hit with no matter what because I fired off my spell.
Right.
You know, it did a lot of those things that it solved a lot of those problems. Now, there were issues, right? I mean, that parity that existed between classes created a sense of sameness, of course, and there was the argument that it was an MMO, which I think is completely false. I think it's closer to being more of a Diablo simulator than anything else.
Right.
But it did capture what Dungeons and Dragons says it is on the tin, which is you go into scary places, you fight monsters, and you take their stuff. I mean, anything else that we attribute to D&D beyond that is your own imposition on what it says. It's like on what you're expecting it to do. It's a role-playing game, sure, but it's Dungeons and Dragons, and it tells you what it is. And if you want to make Dungeons and Dragons a game about, political intrigue, you can do that. But that's not what the game's there to do. And having a robust rule set for that, and you're disappointed that it's not there, I think is like being disappointed that McDonald's doesn't sell a vegan burger. I mean, it's just like, why are you expecting this when it says it's this?
Right. Yeah, I think that one of the things that impressed me at the time and sticks with me is that if you people who came to gaming in the era of fourth edition was what was it, as you say, it ticked all the boxes. They heard about D&D, they played this game, and they like, yeah, it's I think that people like me, and the problem that I had was a problem that I brought, and that was that past expectations I was carrying
Yeah.
on my back with me, um, and because having played all of the first, second, and third AD&D plus basic D&D, there was the through lines that I expected were going to continue as through lines.
Right.
But as you say, if it fulfills the promise of the game, which is you get to go and you get to go and kill things and make yourself a hero and get a lot of treasure, you're playing D&D.
Yeah. I mean, it's just one of those things where I think that I don't think that I would probably, if I was going to run an intrigue style game, I probably wouldn't use fourth edition rules for it, even though it's got skill challenges and even though it had role playing challenges later on in the edition's life. I probably wouldn't do it. I probably wouldn't do it for that game. I would probably just handle all that stuff through just normal interaction role playing. But I think that what the other part of the game that also hurt it was that as much as it radically changed the underlying math of the game and the way the game material is presented, it also underwent seismic setting changes as well, like different expectations about the world and cosmology and how all things kind of fit together. That's where it got kind of a little weird. And I think it was the combination of those two things, plus a dodgy marketing scheme, probably didn't do the game any favors. But for while it was out, it was fun, and it was fun to work on. It was really, really a lot of fun to design. It had lots of cool boxes to fill, and it forced you to stretch beyond your normal kind of approach to building mechanics, because you would have to look at the way this would work on a grid, and you'd have to look at ways to kind of reinvent or model things in different ways to. Because like when I would start with a power, I would probably look at it like, what's the cool cinematic effect I want to produce, and then build the mechanics to produce that effect, rather than what mechanics are missing, and then build mechanics to fit what's missing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just looking here, and so as I kind of told you before we started, I sometimes lose track of what's going on in the chat. But the Jolly Holic said, "Did any of the guests work on Warlord Saga of the Storm?" And that's not ringing any bells with me.
Warlord Saga of the Storm.
Yeah. Does that?
Was that from AEG?
Maybe. I don't. I.
I
So
think
I mean, so the
Warlord.
answer is no. Neither of us did. But
No, but I seem to remember. I actually do remember it. I think Jim Pinto has hilarious stories about that game. But yeah, that was a latter day third edition uh, world and kind of tweaked version of the D20 rule set. And I think that was it was pretty cool.
yeah.
I never got to play with that. I played the card game a few times, but yeah.
All right. So now, having pulled you back from that ledge twice already, uh, situations got it so that you're finished your time working as a freelancer for D&D, and you go off and you decide to do your own thing, and you form Schwalb Entertainment.
Yes. Yeah. It was Shadow the Demon Lord was I guess not I guess after I was done with D&D, I was pretty much done with D&D. There was, and I mean that with like a hard punctuation. I was like,
Right.
I've learned I'm just not going to do this anymore, and I have a lot of baggage from that time. I need to burn all this negativity out of myself, and so that's what was the seed that sparked that would be grow into Shadow of the Demon Lord, which was this horror fantasy role playing game that's number one uh, design goal was to have a role playing game I could run while drunk.
Okay.
So I needed the rules. I needed the rules to be simple enough that everybody could play a little tight, and still have a good time. And so I worked on that for about a year. I used all of my Marriott points from my trips to Seattle to give me to buy hotel rooms all across the Southeast as I would go from game store to game store and run in-store demos of the game to kind of build enthusiasm for it. I hit every convention I could. Ran the Kickstarter, did pretty well. And then did a couple more Kickstarters for it, and then Demon Lord kind of grew into its own thing. I then spun off and did PunkApocalyptic, the role-playing game, which is based on a Spanish miniatures game. It's super dirty and grim and vulgar. A lot of fun to write. And then I did Shadow the Weird Wizard most recently. That was, I guess, last year. We did the Kickstarter for that, did really well, and now we've got a ton of product out for it already, with a ton more in the pipeline.
So let's start with Shadow of the Demon Lord. Aside from the basic rule concept of you need to be able to play drunk, presuming people haven't heard about it, which is probably not a good presumption to make, but for this interview, let's do that.
Sure.
Describe that a little.
So Shadow the Demon Lord says, what if you are playing in a fantasy world that's got a lot of familiar features and components, but then there's this cosmic destroyer of universes that lives in the gaps between realities, that somehow realizes that there's this ripe fruit hanging on the cosmic tree and decides to come and take a bite. And so what happens is that you are playing in a fantasy role-playing environment where you are living through this world's final days. It is a violent, disgusting, sometimes sometimes juvenile in its level of disgust, but it plays super fast. And one of the things I thought about a lot with making this game was that I decided to be very realistic. I was like, well, D&D and Pathfinder together probably own 98% of the market share. So that's what's out there. I can't sell a game that requires you to spend 3 years to complete a campaign. It's just not going to happen. No one's going to play this game. So what can I do that would be a game that people could play that appeals to my sensibility? So I've got the tone and I've got the setting all worked out, and I know how it's all going to hang together. But what can I do mechanically to give you a dialed up, super cool, immersive experience that lasts just a short period of time?
Right.
And so that's where we had this. So I built the game around this idea that every adventure you play through, you can do in one setting, and then you only play through 11 adventures, and you complete the campaign. You're done. And so it's, and I shrunk that with Weird Wizard to 10 adventures, and I think I did the same thing with PunkApocalyptic, and just to keep it so that it's even faster. And the idea is that rather than play through all of the minor adventures and side treks and all the other stuff that make your character who they are, you just let that stuff happen naturally. You talk about that in story, and then when you play through the adventure or the quest or whatever, you're doing one of the most important things your character is going to do over the life of their entire career. And so these 10 or 11 scenarios represent the highest, most dangerous moments that your character will undergo. And so that became kind of the structure of gameplay, that you have short, focused scenarios, link them together to tell your overarching story. And don't delay the really cool stuff that happens at the end of many fantasy campaigns, like when Asmodeus comes out of hell or Orcus comes like the Kool-Aid man through the walls of reality. You make that front and center, and it's what you're dealing with from the very beginning.
So this, I mean, one of the really interesting things about Demon Lord and now Weird Wizard is this idea that so much of gaming is built on this idea that you're making an ongoing campaign. But the fact that this comes in and says, you know what, no, it's already on a time, it's on a timer. Right? You can play again if you want, but this story is on a timer is a really interesting twist that a lot of the big box games didn't do, and it actually, I think, makes it accessible to other groups who are like, well, I just want to play something and be done with it.
Right. And that's also part of the reason why some of the mechanics I opted to go with the familiar rather than break some new ground, right? I mean, you're going to have things like you're rolling a d20, for example, you're adding a number to it, comparing it to a target number. Rather than have classes, we have paths, so you can custom build your character over the course of the campaign, and you just parcel out the benefits, so you're not faced with having a ton of mechanics to worry about at the start. You just gradually build your repertoire over the course of the campaign. It makes it more interesting, I think, as you go, and your characters can become anything they want to be. So you might start off as a warrior who dabbles in magic and then eventually becomes a murderer. And so you have this interesting narrative thread as your character kind of develops in response to the events that happen from adventure to adventure.
You have so you're one of the funniest people I know, but you have a reputation which you played into for a long time of being just profane, shall we say, right? And while everything you've described about the game when you talk about it is heroic, so you're talking about these people being heroic, you've designed a world which is built on this profane thing coming in from another world. I thought when I started saying that I'd wind up with a question at the end, but I don't. That's just a statement.
Well, an example of some of my profanity, there's a spell in Shadow of the Demon Lord called Hateful Defecation, and it causes you to crap yourself to death. So, I mean, that's a kind of, that's disgusting, it's juvenile, but it's funny. But I'm also not there's a lot of the stuff I deal with in Demon Lord. I mean, I try to deal with body horror and gross situations, but I also embrace a lot of the dark fantasy elements of any choice you make has a negative consequence, so that it's not there's rarely a case where you can have a happy ending. You're always going to have a bittersweet. The best you can usually hope for is a bittersweet ending, but
Right.
that's the nature of this particular game. It is a horror fantasy role playing game, and the same, where you Shadow the Weird Wizard has a lot of the same guts. They're siblings as far as their game mechanics go, but
Right.
the play experience is completely different. Which is because while some of the Demon Lord elements are there, and there's a kind of the threat that the cosmology that I built for Demon Lord also kind of exists in the Weird Wizard setting. None of that stuff is ever player facing, or rarely is it, and
Right.
so it becomes a game of heroics where you are trying to help the refugees who have escaped from a collapsing nation into this sparsely populated borderland, which had been kind of under the aegis of the eponymous weird wizard who has disappeared, and his absence enables people to kind of settle into this region, and shenanigans ensue. And so you are playing people who are your objective is to help out the folks who are trying to just see tomorrow, and so the stakes are rather high, but you get to do heroics, and it feels good when you succeed, because usually in the for most of the quests or adventures for this game, there are happy endings. Not always, but there usually are. I mean, I can't change my stripes completely, but
I mean, there's some things people just accept. They expect
right,
this
right.
bulb. Um, do you uh, do you ever have the urge to just do something cozy?
I think Weird Wizard was as cozy as I could get. I have so like I've got this game that I'm gonna do. I think I start on it in a couple months. It's called Oubliette, and it's going to be powered by the Demon Lord engine. But
Right.
you all start in this dark room, and you obviously can't see because it's Oubliette, and so you start off and you're naked and you're afraid, like the show, in this dark room that's filled with other people, and you have to find a way out. And so there's a table that says one of you has a lighter or some sort of light source, and then the table shows you where it is on your body or
Right.
where you found it. So it could be embedded under your skin, in an orifice, found between the cracks between two flagstones, uh, pulled out of the cold grip of a corpse that the rest of the people have been eating. So that's the kind of stuff that I want to play with, right? As you're experiencing this horrific dungeon environment, and really kind of embrace the dungeon as something that itself is terrifying when you just kind of start there.
Right. So so the goal is just to get out.
It's just to get out, and there's a mechanic that allows you to heal, but you only heal by eating people. So you gradually turn
Huh.
into a ghoul as you play through this thing.
All right. Well,
Yeah, I'm
I,
excited.
I, I look forward to seeing this. All right. I'm gonna stop drawing now. I usually get to about this point and close it out. I will finish this after I finish all the others that I finished that are sitting there unfinished. But
It's
uh,
beautiful.
thank you very much. Folks who are have followed the show know that if you are a subscriber to our free newsletter, 50 Years in the Dungeon.substack.com, you'll be the first people to see when this is finished, and before any of your other friends and neighbors. You also get all the insights on what's coming up on future episodes and other behind the scenes stuff. Um, so yeah, so I'll get out of there. We'll come back to just us. So you've been doing this professionally now for a good while, good 20 25 years.
Yeah, around there.
What
23.
um what do you hope that when people hear Robert J. Schwalb is working on a product, what do you hope their thoughts are, or what they're looking for in in that?
I would hope that people see my name on something and know that they will get what I'm promising. What it says the game's about, the play experience will match, uh, and that I take my work extremely seriously,
Mm.
and it causes me. I mean, I don't know who it was. No, it was Hunter S. Thompson who said that something about the fact that the writing experience is extremely painful, and it was a very frustrating experience. I saw a video clip on Instagram about him recently that made me think of it. That I feel very much the same. Uh, I love what I do, and it is also probably the thing that will kill me because it's extremely stressful, and I take it very personally. What I do, everything I make is kind of a reflection of myself, and I never have good separation between what I make and who I am. And so I think there's a connection that this is when you get something from me, there's a lot of thought and a lot of effort and a lot of focus and a lot of white knuckle moments and screaming at the screen and listening to black metal music at the loudest possible volumes. So yeah, I'm not sure if I answered your question, but that's pretty close.
Um, you in the past worked on you've mentioned working on Warhammer role playing game and Black Company and a couple of other things which fit into your general view of grimdark. Right, you've been lucky enough to work on some of the big grimdark titles on top of creating your own. Are
Yeah.
there other anything else? And maybe it's not grimdark. Are there other properties that you would like to be able to work with, or you wish you'd had the opportunity to work on?
Uh, it's kind of weird, right? It's like I've done like I worked on A Song of Ice and Fire. I did the role playing game for that, and then I did Thieves World with Lynn Abbey, and that was an incredible experience. Um, I think at this point now, I probably don't want to work in other people's sandboxes. I think it's when I did Black Company, we built like a 150-page Bible on the books.
Mm-hmm.
When we did Song of Ice and Fire, I would spend 6 to 8 hours a day rereading the books and taking out character names and any details I could and constructing and then folding them into this big document so I'd be able to reference that and it would be authentic to the IP.
Mm.
So I think the only thing that I wanted to do that I was never able to do, and this goes back to D&D, Greyhawk is my first true love as far
Right,
as settings go.
right.
And uh, I think that would be the one thing that would get me to come back to D&D would be the chance to do something with that. I don't know though that that'll probably ever happen. Realistic enough to I think we've seen
Well,
as much Greyhawk as we're going to get from Wizards, and I think
except except they seem to be saying that the new stuff going forward is going to be set and focused in Greyhawk.
I mean much the same way that stuff that they made. I mean maybe I don't know. I mean there's a Forgotten Realm, isn't it? Isn't there yet another Forgotten Realms core book
Oh,
coming
who
out?
is it?
I mean who knows?
I think David Schwartz and Michael J. Pastor are pulling up some of the quotes you might have been looking for. Suffer from my art.
Yeah.
No, it's your turn. And uh, I've always considered writing the most hateful kind of work.
Yeah, that's fair. That's
um,
cool. That's
Matt Sun says the new organized play is set in Greyhawk. Okay, that's different. That's different.
and I know you could do stuff through a DM's guild and stuff like that, but I need to put my stuff,
Right.
my focus
Yeah,
on my
absolutely.
life.
Absolutely. You know what, I also had, I came this close to doing work in Greyhawk back shortly after the buyout, after we moved
Yeah.
to um, Seattle, and Greyhawk was being brought back. I was supposed to uh, write a bunch of those products. I was had been on my schedule. I was going to do about half of the Greyhawk products, and
Oh wow.
then things shifted around, and I had to make a choice between doing the Greyhawk and sticking with the Dragonlance team and the Saga system stuff and stuff that was
Right.
going on. And I was I was saying in my I was I was in the interviewee's chair last week, and I was explaining that how I got into management through that. I was about to take a step into being an assistant manager in that team, but if I stayed on Greyhawk, that wasn't going to happen. So I stayed with the team I was on, and Sean K. Reynolds wound up doing all the books that had been on my list.
So you were going to do Scarlet Brotherhood? Ugh,
Yeah, yeah.
what a chance to do that book. Ugh. Sean did a great job. I
Oh
mean,
yeah, no,
it's a great book.
I think Sean did a better job than I would have in every case. So
It was a
I
super
don't
cool.
begrudge it or look down, but there's an alternate world where that was me.
Mm. Yeah, I think I had something like that with I guess it was the first of the Fiend books for third edition,
Mm.
Hordes the Abyss, and I think I was supposed to work on that, and I was the first and only job I turned down from Wizards. I was like, I'm just too busy with other stuff. I can't tackle this right now.
Yeah,
And so they were like, well, okay, either you're made for this,
yeah.
but yeah. But they got Eric Mona, and he did an incredible job in that book. So
That worked out okay.
yeah.
All right. So before we wrap up here, um, what what do you what do you see coming down the line for you and in the hobby with all the stuff that's happened with uh, between kickstarting and just the rise in indie, kind of an offshoot of different kinds of role playing games that aren't really growing out of the roots, the game mechanical roots of D&D. They're kind of going out on new ways.
Yeah.
What do you think? What do you think we might be seeing going forward?
Well, I wish I had a really good answer for you. I've been thinking about this question for almost the entire interview because, uh, and I don't be misconstrued. I just think what I'm about to say is just kind of a statement of reality. I think it's going to be hard to get games made for the foreseeable future. I think it's going to be too expensive. Uh, I am very fortunate to have gotten my books in from the printer in China who did a great job, and they were really wonderful to work with. But I couldn't have afforded a $59 cover price for those books in now.
In the current fiscal year.
So I think board games, card games, anything with plastics. There's a maybe a loophole that reference books might be a way to get because they're not covered under the tariff. That if you treat your role playing game book as a reference book, then maybe you can get it through. Uh, but I don't know that a lot of the giant board game box sets that have 500 miniatures inside and all sorts of other gewgaws and
Right.
gadgets and stuff like that are going to be possible in the near term. I also don't know. I think what I do think is going to happen is that people are still going. It's Michael. I agree with you. That's I was coming to that. I think what I've talked with the people who my contractors I work with is I think the solution that we're going for is just to go all the way in on digital and print on demand and bypass a lot of that
Have
because
you know what? Here's a question that maybe I want to ask you more pointedly off screen, but can you? It's been as you mentioned after I left Wizards. I've been in a few different small publishing companies, starting with game mechanics, and the challenge has always been that the audience doesn't want to pay enough for digital products to make it possible to pay what it costs to develop those digital products.
yeah, it's a thing. You know, I look at like let's just take just some raw numbers. Take a typical adventure for me if
Mm.
I do the writing. All right, I'll just give you the breakdown of the cost. I pay about $300 for a half page of art. So there's your cover piece. It's cost me some number, $15 to $17 a page for layout. Then you've got to pay. I pay 5 to 7 cents a word for editing, and then I've got a copy of the proofreader who comes in after that. So you start adding all those numbers up, and then you're looking at usually between $750 and $1,000 to produce a 10-page adventure, right? I mean, that's pretty reasonable. 10 to 14-page adventure. Yeah. You put that out. If you dare charge $4.99 for that adventure, you'll sell 10. If you put $1.99 on it, you might sell 50. And then you pat yourself on the back, and that's it's magic. But I also understand that every time I spend that money, I'm spending that money on advertising. Because what happens is that I have 30 quests I'm producing for Shadow of the Weird Wizard. Each one of those is going to cost me money. I'm going to lose money on every one of them I do.
Right.
But the thing is that this is now a supported game. How many games do you see come through Kickstarter that are like, here's our brand new role-playing game set in this particularly weird niche and it uses a 5e rule set. And then the game comes out, you spend your $150, you get the book. You might get the book, you get the book. You look at the book, you use the book maybe once, maybe not at all. And then you never see anything else for this game again. So the game's DOA, right? And so many games that come out now that are just on this assembly list of whatever the hot license is that somebody gets to pick up or whatever else, there's no commitment to making this game playable. So my whole spiel is that I will take a loss on writing short, focused products because it shows that this game is still alive, and I'll do so as long as I'm selling core books. If core book sales disappear, then obviously I'm going to stop doing it. But it keeps people. It means that you're going to have something you can do. You can do something with the thing that you've already invested in, and usually for a low price.
Right.
So, like, I'm asking the typical person to spend $2.99 or $2.49 for 5 hours worth of fun with their friends, and there's the best. That's probably the best bargain you're going to get anywhere.
Right. But it still requires you to have that core book that you're selling.
Right, which is where the money. Which is where, right, and that's where Kickstarter comes in. Now, I'm also experimenting with different ways to deliver products to customers in different formats, using the same role playing game ideas, but packaging them in different ways to try to sidestep the Kickstarter nightmare, right? Because Kickstarter is not exactly easy, as you know, right? It's when you think you've got all the problems solved, 4 more crop up,
right?
And then you run a Kickstarter, and you're committed to handling the Kickstarter until it takes you for the length of time it takes you to get the final product out the door. And for something like Weird Wizard, I built my release schedule to 2027, and I think that's when the last product that I'm delivering on Kickstarter comes out. And I'm just thinking about, it's like, man, I don't know if I'm going to be alive in 2027 at this point, right? It's like, but yeah, they're trying to find ways to sidestep that. It's tricky.
Yeah.
But I do think that, to answer the bigger question, I think that there is certainly a DIY spirit that has taken over the hobby, and I see more interesting things come out of tiny itty-bitty studio, one-man, one-woman shows or one-person shows that produce cool and engaging, exciting things that I want to play with and tinker with than I do out of the bigger companies. And so I think that's probably the way it's going to go. I don't think that the 5e bubble will continue to expand much longer. I think that's probably, we're due for a pop.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, it's the same thing that happened with 3rd edition, right? I mean, the only reason why it didn't happen at 4th was because the GSL was such a damaged idea. It would have been better just not to even offer it. But yeah, I mean, I just think that there is a surplus of 5e content, and there's more than you could ever use. At some point, there's going to be I mean, right now we're still seeing $1 million Kickstarters for a 5e compatible product, but I can't imagine that train running forever.
Yeah, I mean that's interesting. It's so it's so different between the um, 5e or D&D is still the when people come into the game, that's what we want to play. And the question is what what are third party companies making and how much are they selling of them?
Right.
And how many people are going to want to come in and make a new thing rather than support the thing that they see is selling more than anything else.
Yeah, I wonder how much of the big explosive Kickstarters are stuff that people actually use, or they just have as a collector item, right?
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. It's a mystery.
All right. Well, then let's leave it on that mystery. Rob, before I go, I'm going to bring up your link again. People want to see more of what Rob's doing. They should go. No, that's not what I want to hit. I want to hit this here. Rob to schwalbentertainment.com. It's SCHWALB in case you're busy doing something else instead of looking at the screen. And you can find Shadow of the Weird Wizard, Shadow of the Demon Lord, and all your other stuff there, right?
That's right.
And plus, you get more of Rob, which I
And
think
more,
is always a bonus.
and you help take care of my 6 wonderful cats. It's adorable little furry monsters.
do you are your cats internet stars?
No, although P Funk Devil Cat wants to be. She's a 21, 22-year-old white Persian with David Bowie eyes.
Nice.
Uh, she is, and every time I post an Instagram picture with her on it, she's always got a death metal track that's something really profoundly offensive. I've even given her a Gigi Allen song or two. Uh, One of her sisters, Gigi, is I've named her after Gigi Allen. I'm a complicated person, but yeah. So no, none of my cats are internet famous.
All right. All right. Well, then, I'm going to say thank you for coming on, Rob. I've had a really good time chatting with you, as I knew you would. We had a lot of folks coming in chat, so I know they had fun too. Um, I hope maybe I can get you back here sometime again. You know what? I'm going to bounce this off you right now. I've been toying around with the idea of putting together, instead of doing one-on-ones, putting together little group conversations. And I think it would be fun to have you in a group with some other folks that, like Stephen Radley McFarlane. I mean, the folks that it's fun that we've had groups. I want to share the conversations we have on our free time with more people.
Yeah,
So,
cool. Yeah,
so
for you, Stan, I would walk through. I would walk through fire.
see, I'm gonna force you here in public. Say, hey, Rob, what do you think? And then I won't possibly hold you to it.
Okay,
Anyway, thank you for showing up, Rob. Hold on. I'm going to do an outro, and then you and I can make our goodbyes.
sure. Thanks for having me.
All right, so that was my conversation with Rob Schwalb, Robert J. Schwalb. So many times I don't want to say their full publishing name because, I'm hip and cool, and I get to know them as personal people. But yes, no, it's terrific. You should definitely check out schwalbentertainment.com. Go see some of the stuff that he's got going on for all of his games. As he said, he will deliver what he promised. So if what you see has his name on it and it sounds interesting to you, definitely check it out. In the meanwhile, I will be back next week with another interview with a fancy person. I'm not sure who it is right now. I'll do another fancy drawing, and I'll be very pleased to see you all if you can join in. In the meantime, please, please, give us a thumbs up, give us a heart, whatever platform you're watching this on. The reason I ask, and I say this every week, is not so much because it makes me feel good, though it does, but it's because that's what lets other people know. It gets a system to introduce the show to other people. and that's what we want, and it's going very good. The show is getting a lot more action, a lot more people showing up and watching. Views are going up, getting more comments. Again, also, oh yeah, you could put a comment. Not, you're here right now live, and you wrote to me, and I like that. But the algorithm, the crazy algorithm, it likes comments that are put after it's in replay. So if you can come back later in the week, if you're thinking about it, just leave a "Hey Stan, Rob was an awesome guy," or that stank. Don't ever do that again. Or put Rob on and you go away. I don't care. Tell me what you think. I want to hear it. I will be back tomorrow night also with a new episode of my. I was doing so good. A new episode of my improv cartooning show, Random Encounters. So if you come back tomorrow evening at the same time, we'll be doing some more cartooning together. I hope you can join me. Till then, I'm now going to get out of here and stop tripping over my own tongue. But I hope you have a good time no matter what you're doing, and I'll see you next time.